I'm Leo Panitch, and welcome on behalf of the Socialist Project and the Center for Social Justice to this very interesting panel discussion on openings and closures on the European left in 2015. We're lucky to have three Europeans who are centrally involved in what has been going on in Europe on the European left this year. They were here for a workshop that Paul Gray organized at York University on Friday on the theme of From the Streets to the State. And I guess given that all of these three cases we're examining were rooted in the Occupy Indignato movement reaction to the vicious austerity that's been applied in Europe and very notably in Greece and Portugal and Britain. The contradictions of moving from protest into not power but government get revealed inevitably. So, you know, this gives us an opportunity to do some really serious thinking about prospects, about how openings can turn to closures, and perhaps how closures can, however, be barriers that can be overcome. So we have, speaking first, Michalis Spourdalakis, who's spoken here in this room before on Syriza and on the European left. Michael is a founding member of Synaspismos, which was the root organization inside the alliance that Syriza has been since 2004 and is still a member of Syriza. He is formerly the Dean of Economics and Political Science at Athens University, and although he doesn't like me saying so, he's probably the most famous political scientist in Greece these days. Michael, you're first.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really nice to be back. I was here talking in the summer of 2013, and it seems to me that many things have happened since then, although it's to some of us seems that it's only in the near past that this event happened. It was the time that the then right-wing government had shut down our national broadcasting corporation, and there was not much hope for change in Greece. Thank you also very much for the invitation. Thank you for choosing that theme, openings and closures, because that forced me at least to think of what's going on in my country and what's going on in Syriza, what's going on the left in Europe from that point of view, which is kind of very interesting. Also, it's very interesting the fact that we're discussing the left in Greece, in Portugal, and in England on the same table, and try to draft, to think, to reconsider our the state of affairs and our future together. If one had to propose something like that about 4 months ago, wouldn't have been very smart or the obvious thing to do, at least. But now it is, and it's that's very important. This thing alone leads me to my opening statement that one cannot but be optimistic about the state of affairs and the future of the European left. And it seems to me this question about opening and closures it's like a roller coaster. I remember myself and with other cameras, we were really hoping to win in January's election, and so we can have a big party the night of the election. And we knew that the very next day things are going to be quite different, and the obstacles we had to face would be as such that it would be not an opening but a closure. This is what happened. The victory was an opening. The difficulties of forming a government, being forced to a coalition with a nationalist, centrist, or right-center party was a closure. The beginning of the negotiation was an openness. Confronting the media, the whole establishment every day, and the war against Syriza was a closure. Confronting the bureaucracy was a closure. The referendum was an opening. The defeat of signing the agreement was a closure, and the coming back of last month's election was another opening. So I would like to make very quickly some preliminary comments about the opening and the closures, and then try to highlight some of the opening and the closures concerning Syriza in a very concrete way. First of all, it seems to me that's very important, I already alluded to this, that it's very important that we're discussing on this table and elsewhere the future of the left as a whole, and that's very important. It seems that we are making timid but very solid steps towards overcoming the rupture between the parties of the second and the third internationalists, and also the hostility among these parties, but also overcoming the differences between the post-1968 left and the traditional left with all its variations. The second point is that one has to keep in mind that the notions of openings and closures are very feeble notions, especially in times of very deep and long-lasting crisis of capitalism. Every opening entails a closure, and vice versa. Closures and defeats entail new openings for the movement for the left and the future. For example, the defeat, I already said that, the defeat of Syriza in the summer, which was the defeat as opposed to the victory of the referendum, a victory against all of those who wanted to humiliate Syriza, to break up Syriza, and to prove that the left can be in power only for a very short period of time, was answered by the victory of September. And yes, it was a recovery, but this victory was not without many closures, such as very low turnout, no enthusiasm, no mobilization of the party, and so on and so forth. But just last week we have new openings, and these new openings are mobilizations of the farmers. We have strikes in Greece. We have mobilization again of the civil rights movements led by Syriza and Syriza people to bring down the fence at the borders, at the border between Turkey and Greece, and so on and so forth. The third point is that to talk about openings and closures, we need to acquire a macroscopic view so we can identify the positive developments with lasting capacities, or if you like, to identify the questionable or the challenging fields in politics and in society which parties, our parties, can intervene. See the way part of the left confronted Syriza just a few weeks after moving into power, and then see the disappointment we got right after the previous Portuguese election, when the left bloc didn't do very well. So one has to be cool, sober, and try to attain a kind of a more macroscopic view of what's going on before we rush into any conclusions about openings and closures that the left tends to do, sometimes in a very superficial way. Finally, to judge the openings and closures, I would suggest something that to most of us is obvious. We have to go back to our Marxist orientation or Marxist framework of understanding politics, of analyzing the society in its dynamics. So we have always to keep in mind the internationalist dimension of any development before we judge it. We have to be very critical and yet understanding of the social movements. Whatever it moves, we should keep in mind whatever it moves is not necessarily a left-wing initiative, and does not serve left-wing values or principles. And finally, it's we have to understand class as a class struggle and not as mapping of the society. I'm saying this I'm making this last point because there is an argument in Greece, at least, and elsewhere. Well, listen, this is, I even heard it as I was coming here into this room, that, well, Syriza has a very strong class vote of the underclasses support Syriza. So what? It is important, but it's just a starting point, not something that one, because the working class, the unemployed, the other classes, the huge alliance that supported Syriza to come into the office, continue to support Syriza, does not prove that Syriza creates openings necessarily. So one has to keep these things in mind. The same thing goes with the referendum. People thought that the referendum was a huge victory. Yes, it was a huge victory, but one has to look a little bit more closely and see that the Golden Dawn vote was part of the no vote. One has to take into consideration that there were a few nationalist overtones that they are not part, or they would like to think that they are not part of the left's tradition, and so on and so forth. But if you take all this into consideration and think that we had a referendum under capital controls, huge war against the no vote by the media, the establishment, the European elites, etc., it was not just a victory, it was a huge, it was a genuine triumph of that point of view. So there are always, this is what I'm trying to say, in every advancement there one has to be skeptical and about the closures that it develops. Okay, go very, very quickly to Syriza. Syriza answer to the long-lasting political crisis in Greece, crisis of representation, crisis of the Greek democracy, and took advantage of that crisis, interfere in the demand for realignment of the social forces, and answer to these demands in a creative way and make new openings in terms of citizens' participation, in terms of new forms of mobilization, in terms of solidarity, and so on and so forth. Also, Syriza challenged the lack of legitimacy to the governmental policies of austerity, and challenged the key characteristic of the Greek establishment, which always confuses legality with legitimacy, and that was very important. At the same time, having done this, there were some closures in these very fields. First of all, there were some practices and rhetoric that they are against the left's, the left tradition and the historical values of the left. There was some arbitrary violence, some direct action against individuals. There was a rhetoric of nationalism, and we somehow, we as Syriza, that means tolerate arguments about constitutionalism, legalism, etc., which ended up giving rise to people like our former spokeswoman of the House, who was thought that socialism can be achieved through the faithful application of the Constitution. The other thing is that Syriza shows the way how to enter power, to enter office in a rush way, very quickly, how to respond to the popular demand for doing this and stop the humanitarian crisis, and using all means to do that. But this rush, this efficiency to capture office, had some negative effects. It had some closures, and this had to do with routinization of the party's relations to solidarity movements and to other movements overall. The undermining of the party democratic procedures. It was the rise of parliamentarism and the rise of governmentalism even before the party moved into the office. One of the positive and openings which are very important for Europe that Syriza has contributed to the European left is to prove that the crisis is not a national effect, and the crisis had international dimensions, and it had to do with EU, not just capitalism, but more concretely with EU and Eurozone, etc. However, after moving into the office, these efforts to internationalize the fiscal and economic crisis in Greece were contained at the level of the leadership of Syriza and other European leaders, and the whole dimension of internationalism became subject to technocrats and to the balance of power among European states and European elites. At the same time, that leaves a lot of room for the strong and rising Euroscepticism, which becomes an open field for left and right to grasp and build movements and political alternatives. Yes, the fact that in Greece we have very small and contained expression of a neo-Nazi party it was part of Syriza's achievement. At the same time, Syriza did that, I already said that, by adopting a bit of a nationalist jargon and rhetoric, and curving a little bit the class references and so on and so forth. And at the same time, there were some developments in the last year or so that there are at the same time openings and closures. Syriza had at the very same time. It was not a sequel. Syriza was characterized in the last year by a number of political naiveties. He had a naive idea about European Union. He had an instrumentalist understanding about power, and there were some reactions to this. Some part of the Greek left thought, well, we should abandon the office, we should leave the office if we cannot do whatever we wanted. He had a very naive idea what Plan B is all about. He thought that the pluralism in the party was negative, or thought naively that it was only positive, and so on and so forth. And but all these contradictions led to some openings as well. A lot more people, at least in Greece, now know that European Union is not about putting forward your argument well stated and well documented, and of course the elites are going to agree with you and sign a new agreement, or how do you go about dealing with your problems. A lot more people now know that this instrumentalist understanding about political power is dead end, and one has to be more decisive and shouldn't be so timid confronting bureaucracy and obstacles and so on and so forth. The question about plurality and pluralism within the party, it had two phases. For one, it was good to mobilize people, but at the same time, the organized tendencies within the party, some of them not only contributed to synthesis of various currents within the party, but also function as a party within the party. And also, I think this whole experience of negotiations, of defeats and retreats, and the victory of referendum and the election reveal, it seems to me, the idealist dimensions and perceptions and practices of part of the left. A small note here that Greece is a unique, in that sense, radical left in this little country of Europe is it's a little over 44%, having no social democracy more than say 6-7%. If you take into account Syriza, the CP, the left, the Popular Unity, and another tiny little party that makes more noise than it is, which is a little less than 1%, that makes 44%. Nowhere else in Europe this happens. Okay, so the left is there, but it's now, in terms of the opening, in reality, and this is, I'll stop tomorrow, 1.5 points. The dominant discourse in the country was that the memorandum should be the governmental program. Syriza got elected saying that the new memorandum is not our program, we don't subscribe to it. It's against us. And we are going to develop a parallel program and give emphasis to areas that they are not part of the memorandum, which is not an easy thing. But at the same time, it seems to me, under the pressure of the media and all the reactionary forces that have been freely allowed to wage a war against the government, it seems to me that Syriza runs the danger of subscribe to this new TINA in the Greek situation. Now, in Greece, the opening I can see in this very complicated and very contradictional way is the only way out is for Syriza to think back, to understand what brought the party into the office and restructure itself and have a new start on the basis of a new organization that will be able to support its strategy, and this is the only way we can guarantee that the openings are going to be more than the closures. We're going to have a party conference in February. Hopefully, a lot of the wounds of the defeats are going to be treated, and Syriza will hopefully is going to become again in the driver's seat of the European left, helping others as well. Thank you.